So we're going to palpate and look at the muscles on the back side of the torso. A little less familiar to us because we don't really get a chance to reach back there as much as some of the things that we can kind of see and articulate with on the front side of the body. So remember, the two primary muscles that we looked at were the group of the erector spinae muscles running from the base of the skull down to the sacrum, and then the quadratus lumborum muscles on each side of the lumbar spine. So we're going to focus on those, but I want you to feel how the quality of the tissues do change a little bit as we go down through the spine so that you can get a sense, this kind of sensory experience of the quality of the tissues of the erectors. Remember, with the erectors, they're a large group, so they're a group of 3 different muscles in particular that have separate origins and insertions all the way down the sides of the spine. So we've got the spinalis muscles, remember, that are in closer to the spine, the longissimus muscles that are a little bit further, and the iliocostalis, which are the most lateral, that together create this ropey band of musculature that runs up and down the spine. So when we palpate this, what you'll see is that in both the neck and the lumbar spine, and you can feel this on yourself to start with, if you take your fingers here back to the neck, you can feel these really clear kind of ropey pillars of muscle just lateral to the spine on each side. And you can feel the same thing as you come into the lumbar area, that it's very difficult to distinguish and separate the spinalis from the iliocostalis, from the longissimus and the iliocostalis here, that it really just feels like one big band. And part of that is that there's a fascia, we've got the thoracolumbar fascia that encapsulates all of this, which we won't really get into, but as we start to get up into the thoracic spine, you'll see, and depending on your flexibility here, you might be able to palpate a little with your fingers that you can feel the muscle fibers actually kind of separate. And you can start to distinguish the iliocostalis, which is more lateral, from the longissimus, which is right in the center, from the spinalis, which is much closer to the spine. You can feel that there's kind of separate muscle groups as you walk laterally there. So we should be able to feel that a little bit as we go through the myofascial release, but just so you know what you're feeling for. It's nice to have something as a pillow here. So if you like a block as a pillow, you can use a block. If you prefer a blanket as a pillow, you can use a blanket. The first one we're going to start with here, we're actually going to skip the cervical spine because we kind of did a little bit of palpation on that already, and it's a little trickier to get to with the balls here. But we're going to move the balls down. The easiest way to get to this, I'm going to start with them right in between my shoulder blades, not too different from what we began with the rhomboids when we looked at the shoulder. So the myofascial balls or the tennis balls are just going to be a little bit of space between them. If you have a smaller frame, you might even have them right next to each other, but maybe a ½ inch or an inch between them. So I'm just going to set them down. This is the easiest way that I've found, is just to set them down and kind of pay attention to where you land here and trying to move side to side until you find them centered so that they're equidistant from the spine. Now you can decide how much support you want with your blanket or your block there. And I'm going to start here with a little bit of rocking up and down. So it's just an inch because you've got probably a blanket under your head, so you're not going to move too far here. I'm just going to rock up and down a little bit along the erectors there. Then I'm going to set my hips back down, and I'm just going to rock a little side to side. So what I'm trying to feel the difference between is, remember, the rhomboids are going more horizontal, and the erectors are running more vertically here, more up and down. So I'm trying to feel that differentiation of the texture of the tissues as I rock a little side to side versus rocking a little up and down. So you can maybe, though it is hard to distinguish, but you can kind of visualize that distinction between the rhomboids and the erectors. Great, then I'm going to start down a little bit lower so that I don't roll off of my mat here, but you can stay where you like. I'm going to start to roll down or start to roll up my mat so that the balls move down, so that now they're a little bit more in between my shoulder blades, so they're a little bit lower on my back. And again, you can kind of play with, there's not one specific way that you have to do this, but what I'm trying to do is feel for those ropey pillars of muscle that run up and down along the spine. So if it helps you to lift the hips up and kind of move side to side here, or even just rock the torso side to side, so that you can start to feel and acquaint yourself with that tissue of the erectors that, remember we said, tends to get really tight, tends to get a little bit strained and lose a little bit of circulation because of the tension in the tissues there. A little stuck. So for most people, it feels really nice to move around here. Again, if it's painful, please back off. You can throw a layer of your blanket over the balls there. It makes it a little trickier to move around, but it's still feasible. Then from here, you're going to want to move hair out of the way. Move your pillow out of the way, and I'm just going to rock up and down. So we did this one a little bit on the rhomboids before. Now I'm visualizing that the rhomboids are going to be superficial to the erectors, which are running perpendicular. So I've got the erectors here and the rhomboids here running perpendicular to each other. And I'm going to roll down a little bit further until I'm kind of right at the bottom of the scapula. So you can hopefully see a little bit there where the myofascial balls are. So women, this will make sense to you. I'm just above the bra strap. And men, you can kind of, if you wear a heart rate monitor ever, you're just a little bit above that heart rate monitor zone. So I can put my pillow back in place. This is why the blanket's nice, because I can adjust the height as I go. And again, this area can be a little tight, especially in the mid part of the spine. This is an important transition zone as we move from that kyphosis of the thoracic spine into the lordosis of the lumbar spine. So you can usually feel a little bit more tension now in this lower half of the thoracic spine. But clearly that will just depend person to person. So again, I can lift up my hips. If I need more, you can rock side to side, and you're going to start to feel that differentiation a little bit more clearly of the tissues of the erector spinae muscles. And this is one point where you might start to feel some distinction between the spinalis, the longissimus, and the iliocostalis. And really what this should show up as is like, it almost feels like there's several different guitar strings up and down your back that you're kind of feeling several of them that you're clunking over instead of one big rope. So you can kind of feel them start to spread out. And if you don't feel that yet, just start to roll down a little bit further. Anywhere kind of above that lumbar area, you might start to feel that spreading out of the erector spinae muscles, that differentiation of the different layers there, or the different groups. And as you get down to the lower part of the thoracic spine, it's going to be hard to differentiate them. They're going to start to move into that fascia that is encapsulating it, where they're going to feel more like one big rope. Now you can also keep your hips on the ground and just rock the torso side to side for a little more moderate sensation there, a little less intense, or even just lie still. So none of this is a requirement other than just to feel and experience the tissues as you go down the spine, which if you're able to adjust the intensity there, for most people feels really nice, because as we mentioned before, these muscles are firing all day long to keep us upright. Most people don't mind a little intensity in the erectors here. So I'm just going to move my pillow with me, and I'm going to keep going. Take my shirt with me here. Keep going until I'm right at the bottom of the thoracic spine. And now you're going to start to feel it become more ropey. You're going to start to feel them become like one big massive group of muscles that's like one big rope that you're rocking over as we start to move into the lumbar spine. Now, as you move into the lumbar spine, and we're just slowly moving down here, you can always pause the video and stay if you have an area you want to really stay with there, which probably might be nice. But as we start to roll down a little bit further, as we get into the lumbar spine, you can lift the hips, and you're just going to kind of sway the hips side to side to, again, feel the myofascial balls kind of rock over or cross fiber that ropey tissue of the erector spinae. Remember, going from the skull all the way down to the sacrum. Really important that we have that long chain to help us stand upright. And this time you can just move your hands, use your hands to move the balls down a little bit further. And we'll just keep going, feeling the difference in the experience of the tissue. For most people, this lower area, which is a much thicker, denser area, usually is a little less sensitive, still feels good in its own way than some of the tissue in the upper back, though clearly every body will be different. So just noticing that experience as you continue to go down, you're going to go all the way down until you're right above the sacrum, moving an inch or two at a time. And again, you can just rock side to side with the hips, feeling that ropey musculature of the erectors on each side. And you might not want to stop. Feel free to pause the video and continue if you want. Otherwise, release. You can lie flat or place the feet on the floor. You can keep your pillow if you like and just close your eyes. And again, take a moment to notice not only the sensations in the muscles and the back side of the body, but also to notice the effect on the body as a whole. We're starting to explore and play with this tension system, not only of each muscle in specific on its own, but also this community, this interactive, continuous system that depends on each other. To notice how each interrelates and affects the other. Great, so this might be a nice time to stop and just relax. We're going to keep going. We got one more. Another really helpful one, the QL we talked about, which was really helpful for lower back pain, an often kind of hidden culprit of lower back pain. So we're going to look at this one first standing. What I want you to think about with this one, remember, is that it's going to go between, here's the iliac crest, and the lower part of my ribs. And depending on each body orientation, that space might be very small or it might be a little bit bigger. But it's going to run in between the lower ribs and the top of the pelvis. So if I stand up here, what I want to do first is we've just made the erector spinae muscle really clear. So you can palpate for that ropey ridge of muscle. And then I'm going to go just lateral to that with my fingers. And I can take my hands around my waist again. And I'm going to go over the erector spinae muscles, and then I'm kind of going to poke in toward my spine. So I'm kind of pressing in diagonally because the QL muscle is going to lie deep to or underneath the erector spinae muscles, and it'll just peek out a little bit on the edge of them. So if I rock over the erectors and I start to push toward the front of the body and medially toward the spine, I'm going to feel the edge of the QL, and I can kind of rock up and down. Now, the easiest way to feel this is to hike the hip up and feel that side QL engage, and to hike the other one up. All right, you can also side bend, side to side, and feel them eccentrically contract. So as I bend over to my right side is going to passively shorten, or somewhat actively shorten, but in relationship to gravity pushing me down, a lot of what's holding me up is this left side QL eccentrically contracting, keeping me from falling on the floor. All right, so this left side QL is lengthening as it engages, and you can feel that as you press into the QL. You'll feel as you bend to the left, there's less activity on the left than the right side stretching and engaging here. And just notice that as you bend side to side, feel those QL muscles. And notice that you're not moving so far laterally that you're feeling the backside of the obliques, which are going to be really just right on the sides of the waist. So you feel as you put your thumbs straight on the sides, you'll feel the obliques contracting. I really want to be kind of just lateral and deep to the erectors. So for this one, it's really helpful to have a chair. You can do it on the edge of your couch, which will work as well. It just helps you relax a little bit more. So a pillow can be helpful as well. I'm gonna start with 2, but I'll mostly be using 1 at a time. So I'm gonna lie on my back and place my calves on top of the chair. Make yourself comfortable there, however you like for the head. And I'm gonna take the tennis balls now, and I'm gonna put them right in the lumbar spine, just off the edges of my erector spinae muscles. So imagine that if you were to take your myofascial balls there, I'd be placing them so that here's my erector spinae muscles, here's the balls right on top of the erector spinae muscles. I'm just lateral. So I'm catching the edge of the erector spinae muscles, but I'm also really right on the quadratus lumborum. So, legs on the chair, coming down carefully, easily. Rolling onto your side is probably a little better way to do that. But I'm going to take them right behind me in the lumbar spine, so I'm between the pelvis and the rib cage, barely lateral to the erector spinae muscles. So the tennis ball there is kind of hooking on the edge of the erector spinae muscles. So we're going to start on the right side. I'm going to turn my right leg out, and I'm just going to start to roll over to this right side. And I don't even need to roll very much, but what I'm doing is I'm shifting the weight onto the right side tennis ball. So my weight has actually come off of the left side. I can leave it where it was. It's still underneath me, but my weight is not pressing into it. So I can stay there. I'm on the QL. You'll probably feel some tenderness there. If you have some tension in your lower back, you might feel a little bit more. But remember, it shouldn't be painful. You can either back off again a little bit or put a layer of blanket on top of it to help if it's too much. And then if you want, you can start to rock a little side to side. You can come up onto your elbows and rock a little bit up and down and just find a comfortable position there for your legs off to the side. So that you're feeling that space between the rib cage and the pelvis. And I'm just rocking up and down that QL just off the edge of the erector. So my knees are just turning to the side. So I'm on the right side. And I can set it back down, find one spot just to stay with there, kind of midway between the pelvis and the rib cage. And sometimes the second one is nice. You can just wedge it under your hip to hold you up there. There's one other really great spot here for the QL. If I bring my leg back up, I'm going to move the ball down so that it's right above the iliac crest. Again, just lateral to the erectors. So right above the iliac crest. So notice how high up the iliac crest comes, right above it, just lateral to the erectors. So you're probably not far from where you just were. And I'm just rolling around a little bit here to find a spot that's a little bit tender in that QL area. And then closing my eyes just to see if I can relax a little bit. Visualizing the QL going from the iliac crest to the lumbar spine. Also from the lumbar spine to the lower ribs. Also from the ribs to the iliac crest. Creating that lateral support for the spine and the pelvis. And then just switching sides. So put your right leg back up. Start back where you started. So both of the tennis balls there in the lumbar spine, barely lateral to the erector spinae muscles. Then I'll take the left leg out, and already you'll start to feel a little bit more pressure there. I can start to lean and roll over to that left side so that, again, I'm taking the weight off of the right side tennis ball or myofascial ball, so that it doesn't have to be a large range of motion. All I'm doing is just leaning the weight over slightly. Very small distinction, but it's helping me to distinguish between the erector spinae muscles and the QL, which kind of peeks out just behind the erector spinae muscle, or right deep to behind the erector spinae muscles. You can stay there. Again, you can feel free just to hang out and relax there. If you want to, you can lift the hips. You might need to put the leg back up on the chair a little bit more and rock the hips a little side to side. You can also come up onto the elbows and rock up and down in that space, just lateral to the erectors between the top of the pelvis and the lower ribs. So there's a lot of different approaches when it comes to myofascial release. We're just trying to feel the quality of the tissues so you can just experience the sensations and the textures of the tissues here. So find one spot kind of right in the center there between the pelvis and the ribs, lateral to the erectors, and just pause there. Again, you can lean the legs over to the left a little. You could even use that second ball to prop up the hip if you want, if that helps. Notice the sensations. It's not uncommon for people to feel a little achy referral into the hip or the groin or the leg. Which should feel more like a kind of a toothache than anything sharp or painful. Then one more, lift the hips up and move that down. That's probably only going to be a ½ an inch or an inch, but notice that the myofascial ball will be just above the iliac crest, and again, just lateral to the erectors. So that again, you can roll a little bit over to the left side, just finding a little spot. It usually actually feels nice just to rock side to side over that iliac crest, cleaning up that attachment. It can get a little tangled in there. A little tight. And just take a moment to see if you can take a deep breath and soften into these really important, very deep, intrinsic stabilizing muscles for the lumbar spine, creating this lateral support and integrity for this kind of free-floating lumbar spine. And then just release, and if you like, you can just keep your legs on the chair here. Or extend the legs out straight and take a moment just to notice the sensations there, both locally in the lower back, around the QL, as well as in the rest of the body, the hips, the legs, the belly, the chest, the arms, anywhere else that you notice. So you can watch how this interrelated system communicates and affects each other. Great, then when you're ready, you can come back and we'll look at the yoga practice involving the spine and the backside of the body next.